Block 81, Planning Summer Adventures. With the school year officially over, summer stretched ahead like an open canvas, full of possibilities. For the first time, I had several weeks entirely free to explore independently, without the structure of classes or extracurricular obligations. Inspired by previous experiences in San Francisco, I decided to plan a series of trips across the western United States. I began with research, mapping routes, booking hostels, and identifying landmarks, museums, parks, and cultural sites. I meticulously noted bus and train schedules, local dining options, and safety tips. I also budgeted carefully, balancing transportation costs, food, and admission fees. This planning process was both challenging and exhilarating. It demanded organization, foresight, and problem-solving. Emily and Jason offered advice and suggested activities, but they had summer plans of their own. I realized that this trip would be truly independent, an opportunity to test autonomy, judgment, and decision-making. In my journal, I wrote, "Summer is my laboratory for independence. Every choice, every step is a chance to grow." Block 82. First solo journey. The first leg of my journey took me to Portland, Oregon. Boarding the train alone, I felt a rush of freedom mingled with nervousness. Questions flitted through my mind. Would I get lost? Could I communicate clearly if needed? Was I ready to navigate this city entirely on my own? Upon arrival, I quickly learned that independence involved constant problem-solving. I navigated public transportation, asked locals for directions, and figured out payment systems in stores and cafes. Each successful interaction boosted my confidence and reduced anxiety. I explored the city's cultural hubs, parks, and markets, observing the diverse communities and absorbing the local way of life. I noticed subtle cultural differences, from casual greetings to tipping etiquette, that differed from both Japanese and previous U.S. experiences. I reflected, living abroad is about observing, adapting, and engaging thoughtfully with each new environment. Block 83. Engaging with local culture. While in Portland, I joined a weekend workshop on sustainable urban gardening. Participants from different backgrounds shared ideas and experiences. I offered perspectives from Japan, discussing traditional gardening practices and seasonal planting cycles. Through dialogue, I realized that cultural exchange is a two-way process. Listening was as important as sharing, and openness to new methods fostered meaningful connections. I formed friendships with participants, exchanged contact information, and even learned a few local expressions and customs that enriched my understanding of American culture beyond the classroom. At night, I reflected in my journal. Every interaction is a lesson. Culture is not only what is taught, but also what is lived, shared, and experienced. True understanding comes from participation, humility, and curiosity. Block 84. Facing unexpected challenges. Travel, however, was not without difficulties. On my way to a coastal town, my bus was delayed for hours, and I struggled to communicate with the driver who had a strong regional accent. For a moment, panic set in, and I felt the familiar weight of uncertainty and self-doubt. I reminded myself of lessons from the school year: patience, observation, and problem-solving. I carefully checked maps, asked nearby passengers for help, and adapted my itinerary. Eventually, I arrived at my destination, slightly exhausted but proud. This challenge reinforced a key insight. Living abroad and traveling independently requires resilience. Problems will arise, but the ability to remain calm, analyze solutions, and act decisively transforms obstacles into opportunities for growth. Block 85. Reflection on cross-cultural growth. At the end of the summer trip, I returned home with not only souvenirs and photographs, but also profound personal insights. Traveling independently had deepened my understanding of cultural diversity, human interaction, and self-reliance. I had navigated unfamiliar cities, communicated across language barriers, and engaged with people whose perspectives differed from my own. Reflecting in my journal, I wrote, "Independence is more than mobility. It is confidence, curiosity, and adaptability. Culture is not a static lesson, but a lived experience. Every step, every conversation, every challenge abroad contributes to growth. I am learning to navigate life not only in Japan or the US, but everywhere in between." The summer had solidified my sense of self, strengthened my decision-making, and expanded my worldview. I realized that the exchange experience was not merely about temporary immersion, but about building lifelong skills: resilience, empathy, independence, and cross-cultural understanding. Block 86. Returning to school. As September arrived, I returned to school after an adventurous summer of independent travel. Walking through familiar hallways, I noticed subtle changes. Students greeted me with warmth, new teachers expected confident participation, and I felt a renewed sense of belonging. I was no longer the hesitant newcomer who had arrived months ago. Instead, I carried the experience and perspective gained from traveling alone and navigating unfamiliar cities. Emily and Jason welcomed me with enthusiasm, eager to hear stories from my summer journeys. We shared experiences over lunch, comparing travel mishaps, cultural observations, and newfound independence. I realized that the lessons from solo exploration, problem-solving, patience, adaptability would be crucial for the final months of the exchange program. Returning to school also brought new responsibilities. As a senior exchange student, younger students looked to me for guidance, particularly those joining the Cultural Exchange Club. I felt a quiet sense of leadership, understanding that my experiences could provide both insight and reassurance for others navigating a foreign environment. Block 87. Applying lessons from travel. The first weeks of the semester provided immediate opportunities to apply lessons learned during summer travel. In history class, I actively participated in discussions about world cultures, drawing parallels between Japanese traditions and the regions I had visited in the US. My ability to observe, analyze, and communicate insights had noticeably improved, and classmates sought my perspective on cross-cultural comparisons. During group projects, I applied strategies I had honed on my trips: delegating tasks clearly, anticipating potential obstacles, and adapting plans when unexpected problems arose. For instance, while preparing a presentation on global environmental initiatives, I coordinated research efficiently, integrated diverse perspectives, and suggested solutions when disagreements emerged. These experiences reinforced a critical insight: the skills gained through independent exploration, planning, resilience, and adaptability were transferable to academics, social settings, and personal growth. I began seeing challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities to apply knowledge and experience in real-world contexts. Block 88. Navigating social dynamics. Returning to the school community also meant reintegrating into social dynamics that had shifted over the summer. New students had joined, and familiar friends had formed new bonds. I noticed subtle hierarchies, informal leadership roles, and patterns of communication that I needed to navigate carefully. Drawing from my previous experiences with cultural adaptation, I approached these dynamics with curiosity rather than anxiety. I initiated conversations, participated in group activities, and offered guidance where appropriate, balancing humility with confidence. By observing others' behaviors and adjusting my responses, I could engage meaningfully while maintaining authenticity. One afternoon, a minor misunderstanding arose when a new student misinterpreted my quiet suggestions during a club activity. Rather than retreating, I calmly explained my reasoning, listened to their perspective, and collaboratively revised our plan. The situation highlighted a crucial lesson. Effective communication, patience, and empathy are essential tools for maintaining harmony in a multicultural environment. Block 89. Preparing for the final semester. With the academic year advancing, I began preparing for the final months of my exchange program. Teachers encourage students to reflect on their growth, set goals, and complete final projects. I set ambitious yet realistic objectives, improving my English fluency, deepening friendships, engaging in leadership roles within clubs, and documenting my cross-cultural experiences comprehensively. To achieve these goals, I developed a structured plan. I allocated specific hours for studying, extracurricular activities, and personal reflection. I also scheduled time for one-on-one mentorship with younger exchange students, aiming to support them while consolidating my leadership and organizational skills. These preparations were not solely academic. I also prioritized personal development, practicing mindfulness to manage stress, journaling insights to track growth, and exploring opportunities for cultural immersion, such as volunteering at local events or participating in workshops. I realized that the final semester was both a culmination and an extension of the lessons learned throughout the year. Block 90. Reflection on growth and anticipation. Sitting in my room one evening, I reviewed my journal entries from the past year. Each experience, navigating classrooms, participating in competitions, traveling independently, building friendships, and overcoming challenges, formed a complex tapestry of growth and resilience. I reflected on the transformation I had undergone. Initially uncertain and hesitant, I had developed confidence, autonomy, and cross-cultural fluency. I had learned to navigate ambiguity, embrace challenges, and communicate effectively across cultural and linguistic boundaries. These skills extended beyond academics. They shaped my approach to life and self-perception. Looking ahead, I felt a mix of excitement and nostalgia. The final months of the exchange promised new challenges, opportunities for meaningful reflection, and moments to consolidate friendships and experiences. Folding an origami crane, I wrote in my journal, "I am not the same person who first arrived. I have grown, learned, and adapted." The final chapter of this journey will be an opportunity to honor this growth, deepen connections, and prepare for the future with confidence. Block 91. Initiating final projects. October arrived, and with it, the announcement of final projects. Teachers emphasized comprehensive, self-directed work that combined research, creativity, and personal insight. My project would focus on cross-cultural experiences and the impact of student exchange programs, drawing from my year abroad. I spent the first week brainstorming topics, structuring outlines, and gathering resources. I reflected on every experience: academic challenges, competitions, independent travel, cultural festivals, and friendships. The goal was not just to summarize experiences, but to analyze growth, highlight lessons learned, and connect personal insights to broader cultural understanding. Working on this project, I realized how much I had changed. My perspective on learning was no longer purely academic. It now integrated personal development, cultural empathy, and reflection. Each day, I recorded observations, anecdotes, and reflections in a separate journal, which would later serve as the foundation for my presentation. Block 92, Mentoring Younger Students. Simultaneously, I began mentoring younger exchange students who had just arrived. Their nervousness reminded me of my first days. The uncertainty, the fear of making mistakes, and the challenge of adapting to a new culture and school system. I shared practical advice: navigating classes, joining clubs, building friendships, and managing homesickness. I encouraged them to step outside comfort zones, but also emphasized patience and observation. Through mentoring, I noticed how much I had internalized these lessons, and how natural it felt to guide others through experiences I once navigated with trepidation. One afternoon, a mentee approached me, anxious about a cultural misunderstanding. I calmly helped them strategize a respectful response, explaining the nuances of American social interactions. Watching them gain confidence, I felt a sense of pride and fulfillment. Mentorship, I realized, was both a responsibility and a way to solidify one's own learning. Block 93, Deep Reflection on Identity. As the semester progressed, I found myself reflecting deeply on identity. Living abroad had reshaped not only my practical skills, but also my understanding of who I was. I was Japanese, yet I had absorbed facets of American culture, language, and social norms. I no longer felt confined to a single identity. Instead, I began to see myself as adaptable, multifaceted, and globally aware. In my journal, I wrote, "I am both Japanese and a citizen of the world." Each experience abroad has added a layer to my identity. I have learned to navigate complexity, embrace uncertainty, and connect across cultures. I am not losing my roots. I am expanding them. These reflections prompted me to consider how I would integrate this growth upon returning home, maintaining connections, applying cross-cultural skills, and continuing personal development in academic and social contexts. Block 94, Overcoming Final Challenges. Final projects and mentorship were demanding, and the workload tested endurance and resilience. One week, overlapping deadlines, school events, and mentoring commitments created stress. I felt fatigue, frustration, and the familiar stirrings of self-doubt. However, I drew upon strategies cultivated throughout the year: structured scheduling, realistic goal setting, and deliberate self-care. I broke tasks into manageable steps, prioritized critical tasks, and allowed myself brief pauses to recharge. The process reminded me that resilience was cultivated, not innate, and that persistence in the face of difficulty is a hallmark of growth. Completing assignments, guiding mentees, and reflecting daily reinforced a vital lesson. Challenge and discomfort are integral to meaningful development. The final months of the exchange were not merely a conclusion, they were a culmination of all lessons learned, applied deliberately and thoughtfully. Block 95, Celebrating Cultural and Personal Growth. By November, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Final projects were submitted, mentorship programs concluded successfully, and friendships had deepened. I observed not only academic and linguistic growth, but also emotional and cultural maturity. At a school gathering celebrating exchange students, I shared insights from my project, the importance of adaptability, empathy, and cross-cultural understanding. Teachers and classmates listened attentively, asking questions and reflecting on their own experiences. I realized that the year had transformed not only my own perspective, but had also influenced others. Folding an origami crane in front of friends, I wrote, "This year has been a journey of growth, resilience, and discovery. I have learned to navigate challenges, embrace difference, and reflect on identity. I leave with skills, insights, and memories that will guide me for life." Living abroad is not merely a temporary experience. It is a transformative chapter that shapes who I am and who I aspire to become. Block 96, Planning Farewell Activities. December arrived with a crispness in the air, signaling the end of the school year and the approaching conclusion of my exchange program. The reality of leaving began to sink in, and I felt a swirl of emotions: nostalgia, gratitude, excitement, and a touch of sadness. I wanted to mark the end of this journey meaningfully, both for myself and for the friends, teachers, and host family who had shaped my experience. I began planning farewell activities. With Emily and Jason, we organized a small cultural showcase, sharing photos, stories, and mementos from my time abroad. I also decided to prepare personalized letters for teachers and friends, expressing gratitude for their support, guidance, and companionship. Even these planning moments became reflective exercises. I carefully considered what memories, experiences, and lessons had impacted me most. Writing letters, arranging presentations, and rehearsing speeches gave me a sense of closure, allowing me to process the whirlwind of growth, challenges, and joy experienced over the past year. Block 97, Consolidating Experiences. As the farewell week progressed, I spent quiet hours alone in my room, reviewing journals, photographs, and souvenirs. Each item was a touchstone of growth and reflection. A folded origami crane from my first day, notes from summer travels, sketches from school projects, and small mementos from friends. I categorized lessons learned into themes: resilience in the face of challenges, adaptability across cultures, leadership through mentorship, and independence gained through travel. Writing these reflections crystallized my experiences into a coherent narrative, allowing me to see the year not as a series of isolated events, but as an interconnected journey of personal and cultural growth. I also reflected on emotional growth, overcoming homesickness, managing self-doubt, navigating interpersonal tensions, and building meaningful friendships. These reflections revealed not only what I had learned about American culture, but also about myself, my values, strengths, and capacity for empathy. Block 98, Farewell Celebrations and Emotional Closure. The farewell celebrations were bittersweet. Students, teachers, and host families gathered for a final gathering, sharing memories, laughter, and heartfelt messages. I presented my cultural showcase, demonstrating origami, tea ceremony elements, and highlights from my independent travels. Classmates asked questions, laughed at shared stories, and celebrated the year together. During the ceremony, I realized how deeply I had been woven into the school community. Friends who had once been unfamiliar faces now felt like family. Teachers who had guided me became mentors and allies, and the exchange program itself had become a catalyst for growth and connection. Tears welled up as I hugged friends goodbye, and I took a quiet moment to acknowledge the emotional significance of leaving. Farewell was not merely an ending, it was a recognition of transformation, a celebration of growth, and a promise to carry lessons forward. Block 99, preparing to return home. With farewells complete, I focused on practical preparations for returning to Japan. Packing, arranging travel, and saying final goodbyes to my host family. Each object I packed was a symbol of the journey. Journals filled with reflections, souvenirs collected from travel, and small gifts exchanged with friends. I spent the last few days revisiting favorite spots, cafes, parks, and neighborhoods I had grown to love. Walking these familiar streets, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. I reflected on the independence I had gained, the friendships I had cultivated, and the cultural insights that had reshaped my worldview. At the airport, I paused to absorb the moment. I realized that leaving was not an end, but a continuation of growth. Returning home with new perspectives, experiences, and confidence to face future challenges. I whispered a quiet promise to myself. Carry these lessons forward, and let this year guide the next chapter of life. Block 100. Returning home with a transformed perspective. Back in Japan, the familiar sights, sounds, and smells initially felt comforting, yet strangely different. I had changed. I returned with a transformed perspective, shaped by months of immersion in another culture. Even daily routines carried new meaning, as I applied lessons learned abroad: patience, adaptability, cross-cultural empathy, and confidence in unfamiliar situations. I shared my experiences with family and friends, recounting challenges overcome, friendships formed, and adventures undertaken. They marveled at the maturity and perspective I had gained. Yet I realized that the true impact was internal. A deeper understanding of myself, an appreciation for diversity, and a sense of resilience that would guide me in school, future travel, and life. Folding an origami crane one last time, I wrote in my journal. This year abroad was more than a journey, it was a transformation. I faced fears, embraced challenges, and learned to navigate a world beyond my own. I return home not only as a student, but as a global citizen, ready to apply these lessons in every chapter yet to come. The crane rested on my desk as a symbol of growth, courage, and the endless possibilities that lie ahead. And though the exchange year had ended, the journey, both inward and outward, continued, carrying me forward into the future with confidence, gratitude, and wonder.